king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 305, Compilation of Textbooks and International Phonetic Alphabet. The next morning, Marin got up refreshed and went running alone. As for Angela, she did not run because she was unwell. After breakfast, Marin came to the office area in front of the palace and began to handle daily affairs. In fact, it was mainly signing and so on. After all, Geoffrey was also a good hand at handling government affairs. In addition to the financial issues, Marin sent people to supervise them to prevent Geoffrey, the old bureaucrat, from embezzling. Marin was not willing to take care of other matters too much. In addition to signing and stamping, Marin had another important job to do. He needed to write teaching materials for the new school. Marin didn't need to spend too much time on language. These days, most schools in Western Europe use the Bible as their language textbook. Even noble children have been reading the Latin version of the Bible since childhood. Whether you understand it or not, just memorize it first. Then, the missionary in charge of teaching will explain it to you slowly. As for some church schools for common people, they would use their native language to teach the Bible to students. Generally speaking, only children of nobles would learn Latin. Of course, children who were sent to monasteries at an early age also learned Latin. To this end, Marin decided to implement bilingual teaching in all schools and artisan schools in the country. The so-called bilingual is naturally German and Frisian. However, Frisian does not have its own written language. At present, it is only a spoken language. In fact, Frisian used to use an ancient runic script. However, after the Christian conquest, the runic script was lost. Therefore, the Frisians now communicate in spoken Frisian, while the educated people all learn German. Because German has a complete written language. Marin thought about it and decided that since Frisian and English have similar pronunciations, it would be better to just use English textbooks. So he sent someone to England to buy an English version of the Bible as a teaching material for Frisian. As for the German version, there was no need to worry, as the German version of the Bible was everywhere in Germany. In order to facilitate education, Marin even sent people to the UK to hire. Under the pretext of traveling around the European continent, they came to the craftsman school in East Frisia to teach Frisian, which is very close to English, and hang up signs in local churches. After all, East Frisia was seriously short of educated missionaries. The previous missionaries had to give priority to the 5 major aristocratic schools. Therefore, there was a shortage of teachers in those schools in the countryside. In addition to those literate craftsmen, Marin supplemented some down-and-out missionaries in England, and most of them were missionaries in London, so that students could learn a pure London accent. Of course, as a time traveler with modern thinking, Marin did not forget to add phonetic symbols to words. Therefore, the International Phonetic Alphabet was invented very simply. After a long time, Marin completed the annotation work of the English version of the Bible. In this way, as long as the children memorize the international phonetic symbols, they can easily read the annotated English version of the Bible. However, when it came to annotating German phonetic symbols, Marin was in a dilemma because German has 30 letters, for more than English. Moreover, the International Phonetic Alphabet is not enough to annotate German words. Marin had learned English in his previous life, but not German. In this life, although he could speak German, he had never seen German phonetic symbols in both lives combined. For this reason, Marin had to let everyone teach German casually for the time being, while he himself studied how to refer to the International Phonetic Alphabet and come up with a German phonetic symbol table. In addition, there are many German dialects. For convenience, Marin naturally had to set a standard. Otherwise, it would be troublesome to annotate with phonetic symbols. Originally, Marin planned to use the pronunciation of High Standard German, which was popular in later generations. However, Marin himself was not able to pronounce High and Low German correctly. If he used his own inaccurate pronunciation to annotate, it would definitely be a joke. Finally, Marin decided to use the pronunciation of Low German, which is popular in the northwest coastal areas of Germany, as the standard pronunciation for written language. Among them, the lower reaches of the Rhine River, including the Frisian region, where Marin is from, belong to Lower Saxony, and the German used there is also called Low Saxon. Because the Duchy of Saxony a long time ago once controlled a large area in northern Germany, which is completely different from the current territory of the Duchy of Saxony. Even the British are the descendants of the Angles and Saxons who crossed the sea. Therefore, English is also called Anglo-Saxon. The Saxons here refer to the Lower Saxons on the North Sea. Once upon a time, the ancestors of the British and the Frisians lived by the North Sea of Germany. Their languages were also very similar or the same. Although hundreds and thousands of years have passed, Frisian is still very close to English. Because the Frisians were excluded from the German mainstream for a long time, the language of the Frisians has not changed much for thousands of years. The Low Saxon language in Lower Saxony is different. The Lower Saxons have integrated into the German mainstream and have been greatly influenced by the High German language in the east and south, and gradually became quite different from English. However, in general, High German and English are very different. Frisian and English are very close, and Low Saxon, the northwestern region of Low German, is between German and English. Low Saxon can still communicate with High German, but you have to speak it more slowly. Low Saxon is a little difficult to communicate with English and Frisian, but there are still many similarities. Many words are very similar, but the pronunciation is different. If you add gestures, people who speak Low Saxon can also communicate with people who speak English or Frisian. Therefore, if we use the International Phonetic Alphabet to annotate Low Saxon, the changes will not be very big and it will be simpler. If we use the Austrian German accent, we will not be able to communicate with English. Moreover, Low Saxon is widely used. It applies to the entire Lower Saxony region, later Lower Saxony, North Rhine-Westphalia, including the Ruhr area where Marin's hometown is located, Bremen and Hamburg in the east, and even the western half of Schleswig-Holstein under Danish control. Low Saxon is also popular in the eastern part of the Netherlands, but the Frankish language Dutch is also used at the same time. In other words, the scope of application of Low Saxon is still very wide, and it is closer to English, which facilitates the modification and use of the International Phonetic Alphabet. Therefore, Marin finally made up his mind to use Low Saxon as the pronunciation standard for East Frisian German textbooks. After adding phonetic symbols, it is difficult to make a mistake in pronunciation. The importance of phonetic symbols is similar to that of Chinese pinyin in later generations. In fact, Chinese pinyin is a Chinese system that imitates the International Phonetic Alphabet. Its main function is to facilitate students to recognize characters and to stipulate standard pronunciation, which is very convenient. However, Marin could not modify the International Phonetic Alphabet into a German version by himself. He was just an ordinary undergraduate in his previous life, not a language expert. Therefore, Marin planned to invite several scholars who were also familiar with Low Saxon to complete this work together. Even if he could not invite a great scholar, the university students of Cologne University in Cologne, which also belongs to the Low Saxon speaking area, would be a good choice. After all, with the International Phonetic Alphabet as a reference, it is still possible to compile a set of German phonetic symbols. It's not that Marin couldn't do it himself, but it would take a lot of time. After all, compiling a book requires consulting a lot of information, repeated comparisons and verifications. As a prince, he has a lot of things to do every day, so where does he have time to do these? You know, Marin not only intends to compile a set of German phonetic symbols suitable for the German language, but also intends to compile a German dictionary similar to the later Xinhua dictionary. It is a huge project. Therefore, he can't do it alone, and he doesn't have that much time. However, he must be the editor-in-chief. After all, this is a great thing that will be passed down through the ages. Marin will not let others take credit for this. So, Marin temporarily put aside the work on German phonetic symbols and German dictionaries and started writing elementary school mathematics textbooks first. Mathematics for grades 1 to 3 is very simple, just the most basic addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, and then they will learn mixed operations of the 4 arithmetic operations, etc. Marin only needs to write some easy-to-understand exercises, such as counting ducks, counting eggs, pulling carrots, etc., which are extremely childish questions. In addition, in the elementary school mathematics textbook, Marin used modern Arabic numerals. The writing of Arabic numerals at that time was slightly different from that of modern ones, and completely eliminated Roman numerals and Greek letters. Of course, Roman numerals and Greek letters will appear in middle school mathematics. However, it is still early for middle school. After all, the first grade of elementary school has not started yet, and Marin has plenty of time to write middle school textbooks. For now, Marin only needs to finish writing the textbooks for grades 1 to 3 of elementary school, which is enough. Before the German phonetic symbols and German dictionary were compiled, Marin asked the school to teach German in the original way. As for Frisian, the English version of the Bible with international phonetic symbols was used as the teaching material. In addition, Marin also planned to send someone to Britain to invite a few scholars to compile a small English Frisian dictionary to facilitate students to learn Frisian. Once the phonetic symbols and dictionaries are completed and put into use, language learning will be simplified many times, and it will also be convenient for teachers to teach students how to write and pronounce, so that culture can be spread quickly. As the inventor and initiator of modern phonetic symbols and new dictionaries, Marin's reputation will be unparalleled. Chapter 306 Training New Doctors. Adler's daughter-in-law Liv gave birth to a daughter in late May after 10 months of pregnancy and named her Margaret. Thus, the third generation of the Hoffmann family was born. In order to take care of Liv and her daughter, at the strong request of Lady Mary, the chief court doctor Marin was sent to Lear County to take care of Liv and Margaret for half a year. Then, Bartle was the only doctor left in the Auric Palace. Fortunately, the two Mongolian doctors, Marin and Bader, were as strong as bulls and rarely got sick. Otherwise, with only Bader left, if something went wrong, Orihai would have no reliable doctors to use. Marin did not dare to use those local, bloodletting doctors. Therefore, members of the Hoffmann family and nobles close to Marin were accustomed to seeing two Mongolian doctors. Although the Mongolian doctors' methods were somewhat rough and direct, the results were still very good. However, sometimes when multiple nobles were sick at the same time, Marin and Bader were a little overwhelmed. Especially after Marin was sent to Lear County, Bader was very busy. It was only then that Marin realized that he was so busy building ordinary schools that he forgot to build a medical school. You know, there were few reliable doctors in Western Europe at that time. Marin and Bader, two Mongolian doctors, combined the herbal medicine technology of the Central Plains with the unique bone-setting and trauma treatment methods of the grasslands. They could completely look down on any Western European doctor of that era. With these two treasures here, Marin didn't even think of finding apprentices for them. Marin wanted to slap himself twice, but before that, he had to find a group of apprentices for the two of them. Yes, a group of disciples, not just a few disciples. Finally, Marin began to select smart serfs who were interested in medicine. After a month of selection, Marin finally selected 30 of the smartest teenagers as disciples of Marin and Bader. These teenagers were all around 16 years old, which was the time when their minds were the most flexible. As for the idea of rebellion, it was not something that these serfs should have. Since ancient times, most rebels came from wealthy families. Only those who were well-fed, or at least well-fed and well-clothed, had the leisure to rebel. Children from poor families became sensible very early, because they had no time to think about other useless things, otherwise, they would starve to death if they were not careful. Therefore, rebellion is something that only modern children who have nothing better to do will have. Of course, children from wealthy families in ancient times also had this situation. As for children from poor families who don't have enough to eat, they are often very sensible when they are in their teens, and they can even support a family and have no time to think about anything else. The children that Marin selected were all very sensible children from the poor. At their age, they already knew how to work for their families. Many of them were even pulled from the fields for the auditions. If the Earl wants to select people, won't the whole country respond enthusiastically? Of course, the noble children don't need to respond. Because their children have already made plans. The children are also preparing to enter the noble school that Marin plans to open. Only the children of serfs will be so concerned about Marin's selection. Because this is the only way to get rid of the lowly status of serfs. If one learns medicine well and becomes a medical officer, one will be able to directly escape the status of a serf and at least become a commoner, or even a low-level noble. Moreover, the school that Marin was going to open was not going to enroll children over 15 years old, not including 15 years old. Because it was not cost-effective to train children over 15 years old. Because children of this age already had fixed thinking and ideas. It was better to train those younger and more malleable children. After all, Marin was only in his early 20s and had plenty of time to wait for these children to grow up. As for those teenagers over 15 years old, Marin originally planned to wait until the school was on the right track, and then train the teachers trained to provide literacy to those adults who needed it. For example, to provide literacy to those young people who became low-level officers and teach them to recognize words or something. It just so happened that this time, the two Mongolian doctors were looking for disciples, so Marin held an open audition among the teenagers who had been excluded from education before. He specifically selected those who were just over 15 years old but relatively smart, and asked them to study the grassland medicine with oriental characteristics with Marin and Bader. In view of their lack of cultural background, Marin was even willing to find someone to teach them how to read. Marin and Bader would teach them medical knowledge when they had time. They had been with Marin for 2 years and could communicate normally in German. If some medical terms were not explained clearly, Marin could be asked to act as a translator. After all, Marin and Bader were proficient in the Datong dialect of Chinese and could accurately express medical knowledge in Chinese. In fact, a lot of their medical knowledge was learned from Chinese medical books. Marin was the soul of China. When communicating with the two, it was easy for him to understand what they meant and then accurately translate their meaning. Because Marin was not there, Marin handed the 30 teenagers to Bader. Bader was naturally full of complaints because he was too busy. However, he had no complaints about taking apprentices. After all, if the apprentices got the hang of it, they would be able to relax. Moreover, Marin was also very considerate. While asking them to teach apprentices, he also gave them an extra 2 shillings per day for teaching. If they taught 360 days a year, they could earn an extra 144 gold coins. For a doctor, it was definitely a high salary. What's more, this was extra income, not included in the previous salary. You know, Morigen and Bader both have children who are about to grow up. They are also happy to get a little more salary. As for keeping their own things, if they were in their hometown of Mongolia, they might do so. But now they have left their hometown and rely entirely on Marin for their living. If they offend Marin because of hiding their own things, it would be more trouble than gain. Moreover, Marin made a solemn promise to the two of them: if they could teach these 30 young men to be as good as them, both of them would be awarded a hereditary knighthood and be rich and powerful for generations. This is much more attractive than any monetary reward. Which man would not be happy to make his descendants rich and prosperous? So, the two of them naturally worked very hard. In order to bring in some modern, private goods, Marin even planned to give lectures to these 30 teenagers from time to time. Mainly, to teach them some common sense about hygiene and disinfection. Although Marin was not proficient in medicine, he had seen too many health programs and health articles in his previous life. If he just gave some of them to these teenagers, they would benefit a lot and become masters of medicine in this era. Of course, Marin did not intend to make public the training of these young men. Because, in this era, the church also has a lot of control over medicine. Many church pastors actually act as doctors who are also good at double swords and often bleed their clients. After all, practicing medicine to save lives has always been one of the ways the church demonstrates its benevolence. If a medical school is run publicly, it will be suspected of stealing business from the church. Marin asked Morigen and Bader to teach the children Mongolian medicine, which was naturally contrary to Western traditions and not in the interests of Catholicism. Therefore, these children all studied with Morigen and Bader as apprentices. They even studied in the palace clinic inside the Auric Palace. This made it convenient for Marin to give them lessons when he was free. It just so happened that Marin was going to expand the palace. So, Marin simply planned to build a courtyard in a corner of the palace as a place for Morigen and Bader to educate their disciples, next to the palace hospital in the front yard of the palace. Then, Marin thought about it, and selected 30 smart teenagers to join this group and receive education from 2 Mongolian doctors. After all, not everyone who goes to study will succeed. Marin's requirement is to train at least 20 people with good medical skills among these 60 people. As for the other 40 people, they can be eliminated. But even those who are eliminated may not be competent as comprehensive doctors, but they can be used as military doctors who only deal with trauma. Early military doctors only need to deal with trauma on the battlefield, but they are not as comprehensive and powerful as military doctors in later generations. Many people are also at the level of second rate. After all, famous doctors must treat dignitaries and it is impossible for them to follow the army. You know, Mongolian medicine is very good at bone setting and trauma, which are most suitable for military service. Moreover, Morigen and Bader are also good at veterinary medicine, especially treating horse diseases. At worst, being a veterinarian and managing horses in the army is also very good. In short, Marin welcomes doctors or veterinarians with excellent medical skills. One more doctor means more security for the lives of the East Frisians. One more military doctor means more security for the lives of the soldiers. And one more veterinarian means more security for the lives of the war horses. However, studying medicine is very difficult. In later generations, the duration of medical universities is generally longer than that of ordinary majors, and many are 5-year programs. There are even 7-year medical programs. Therefore, Marin gave these young people 10 years to grow up. 10 years is enough for these young people to grow into a good young doctor. Chapter 307 Departure. Leonardo da Vinci finally made the sextant, and it was much more efficient than the last time he made a clockwork flintlock. It was no wonder that Leonardo da Vinci was a bit perfunctory last time, but this time he worked hard for his lover. Therefore, in a short period of time, Leonardo da Vinci successfully developed the sextant mentioned by Marin. Not only that, Leonardo da Vinci also compiled a set of calculation tables and lookup tables. When measuring latitude, you only need to measure the angle between the sun and the sea level, and you can directly get the latitude data according to the lookup table. Of course, if the angle is not an integer, you can calculate it according to the formula. It should be noted that this lookup table is related to the season and the altitude of the sun. Such things are naturally completed by Marin and Leonardo da Vinci together. Because Leonardo da Vinci's concept of the altitude of the sun is still vague, Marin, who has not studied high school geography, is sure. Therefore, the calendar comparison table in the lookup table is mostly from Marin's hand. In this way, as long as the captain is good at math, he can easily calculate the latitude based on the comparison table. As for longitude, it is a little more troublesome. Although Leonardo da Vinci and Italian watchmakers have developed clockwork clocks with good precision, the accuracy is still a bit problematic. Therefore, Marin asked them to test the error of the clockwork clock repeatedly. Every day at noon, the time is compared to record the error. Then, when sailing, the accurate time can be judged based on the average error. The reason why the error is recorded every day is actually to select the marine clock with the most stable error. Stable error indicates that the clock has the highest accuracy. As long as a fixed error is added or subtracted at noon every day, the time can be easily adjusted. If the error is unstable, the error is 10 minutes today and 20 minutes tomorrow, such a clock cannot be used to calculate time. Once at sea, the captain can arrange for someone to adjust the error once a day to maintain the accuracy of the time. Then, based on the time difference, the longitude can be easily calculated. As for how to calculate longitude, this is relatively easy. As long as the time of the marine clock is accurate, when the sun is at the middle of the sky at noon, the accurate time obtained by the average error of multiple marine clocks can easily determine the standard time difference between the current position and auric time. The circumference of the Earth is 40,000 kilometers, and it is divided into 24 time zones. In other words, each time zone is 1,666.667 kilometers long. The difference between the current position and auric by a few hours is a difference of 1,666.667 kilometers. Marin did not tell Amerigo the circumference of the Earth, but told him that a difference of 1 hour is a difference of 1,666.67 kilometers in the horizontal distance. Then, just calculate according to this principle. As for more, he did not tell Amerigo. After all, he did not plan to let him sail around the world, so why would he know so much? After selecting the 10 clockwork marine clocks with the most stable errors, Marin called Amerigo over and asked Leonardo to teach him how to use the sextant and calculate the latitude. Marin, in turn, told him how to calculate the horizontal distance. In fact, because Magellan had not yet sailed around the world, people were still not very clear about the concept of latitude. But Amerigo was an excellent captain and a half-baked astronomer, so it was not difficult to teach him. Anyway, Marin only asked him to use the sextant to calculate the latitude and lateral distance of each node on the route, and then record it in the logbook. At that time, Marin could easily calculate the longitude based on the lateral distance. With the data of longitude and latitude, and the use of the sextant, the next captain, as long as he knew how to calculate longitude and lateral distance, could easily correct the course and reach the destination. After Marin and Da Vinci taught Amerigo how to use the sextant and calculate the horizontal distance, longitude, a few days later, good news came from Terralenti. 250-class armed merchant ships were ready. According to convention, these two ships were named 2503 and 2504 respectively. The reason why it was built so quickly was because we had sufficient experience before. In addition, Marin was very good at supplying materials, so there was no need to wait for materials in the middle of the process. In addition, the craftsmen were all experienced, so it was naturally easy to make. However, when manufacturing the 250-class armed merchant ship, Marin actually held back and did not give the technology of high-temperature steam processing ship ribs to the Thorland shipyard. Therefore, when the Thorland shipyard manufactured the ship ribs, it still used the old method of sawing a very wide piece of wood into an arc, which was very wasteful of wood. At this point, the cost of manufacturing ship ribs at the Thorland shipyard was still very high. However, Marin also thought of a good idea, which was to let the Emden shipyard send the processed ship ribs to Thoralki. In this way, Thoralki shipyard would not have to waste so much wood. As long as they told the Emden shipyard the specifications and sizes of the ship ribs, the craftsmen of the Emden shipyard could use steam boxes to process the corresponding ship rib pattern requirements and then ship them to Thoralki. Generally, merchant ships do not use many ribs. A ship with a keel length of 24 meters only needs 33 pairs of ribs. A 250-class armed merchant ship only needs 27 pairs of ribs because its keel length is only 20 meters. After using high-temperature steam boxes for processing, the cost of the ribs is much lower, it is not complicated, and there is no waste of wood. As long as the processed ribs are air-dried again, they can be taken back and nailed to the keel. After the skeleton is ready, thick wooden boards can be covered on the outside. Then, it is time to apply oil and paint. In fact, the materials for the two ships 2503 and 2504 were prepared early. Therefore, this shipbuilding saved a lot of material preparation time. Therefore, the Thorent shipyard was able to build and launch both ships in just 4 months. Because the ribs, which are the most difficult to process in the ship, were actually processed together when 2501 and 2502 were manufactured last time. Therefore, this shipbuilding was very fast. The 500-ton warship that Marin asked Emden shipyard to build was not so fast. Using a high-temperature steam box to bend the ribs of the ship saved money, but it was time-consuming. It was not the processing time, but the drying time after processing. The wood used in shipbuilding cannot be damp. Therefore, the wood used in shipbuilding is air-dried for 1 or 2 years. Marin asked the craftsman to use high-temperature steam to smoke the ribs of the ship for several hours, and all the previous air-drying efforts were in vain. Therefore, after the ribs of the ship are processed and formed, they need to be air-dried again for several months. In other words, if you want to wait until the ribs of the ship are nailed to the keel, you have to wait for several months. No wonder it took a year to build a ship in ancient times. Marin thought about it and realized that this was too time-consuming. So he simply ordered a large amount of wood again and asked the craftsman at the Emden shipyard to process a batch of spare ribs. In this way, when the ship was built next time, there was no need to fumigate and process the ribs again. After all, the newly processed ribs would have to be air-dried for several months, which was a waste of time. If the processing time of the ribs was excluded and the keel and planks were prepared, a ship could be built in 3 or 4 months. Thinking of this, Marin's heart was very hot. It seems that logging in America is still very promising. If a large amount of wood is prepared in America, and then processed into suitable keels and ship ribs. With all the materials and enough craftsmen, it is possible to produce ships just like soldiers. So, when Amerigo arranged the crew and prepared all the supplies, Marlin specifically pulled him aside and asked him to modify the route. Amerigo was a little confused when he saw Marin took out a map with the outline of the east coast of North America. "Mr. Earl, what is this?" "This is a map of the coastline of the east coast of the savage continent." Is this true? Has anyone explored the savage continent before?" Amerigo was shocked. "You know, now Europeans only know about some islands in the Caribbean region explored by Columbus. My teacher, the great Albert Einstein, once visited these places." "Then your request, Lord Earl, is: after you explore Grenada, go north along the Windward Islands. After arriving at Barbuda, turn northwest and go to the Bahamas, which was first discovered by Columbus. Remember, don't go north from Barbuda, as that is the Bermuda Triangle." "Bermuda, the Devil's Triangle." Amerigo trembled, a little scared. "Well, this huge sea is very dangerous. My teacher said that there are devils under the sea that will devour ships. He even heard the devils howling. Moreover, the seaweed in this sea is big and long, which can easily entangle the ship. My teacher said that those seaweeds may be driven by devils to drag ships and people into the sea," Marin said mysteriously. Amerigo was a little scared, although he didn't really believe in demons. But the huge seaweed made him a little afraid. Because if the seaweed was long enough, it could indeed entangle the boat. In inland areas, it was normal for small boats to be entangled by seaweed. But it was not a big deal for a small boat to be entangled by inland river seaweed. Because people could abandon the boat and go ashore to ask for help. However, in the middle of the vast ocean, if the ship was tangled in seaweed, it would be "nothing can be done if you cry to the heavens or the earth." So Amerigo nodded vigorously, indicating that he would not commit suicide. Then, Marin continued to instruct: after you arrive at the Bahamas, sail northwest and you will encounter real land. This is the Florida Peninsula of the savage continent. If you go north along the peninsula, you will arrive in New York at about 40 degrees 43 minutes north latitude. Ugh, New York hasn't appeared yet. Marin then remembered that none of the place names he marked had appeared. But it doesn't matter, he continued speaking. After you arrive in New York, continue to sail northeast along the coast. Then, you will see 2 small islands. The one close to the land is called Martha's Vineyard, and the other is called Nantucket Island. The second mission this time is to discover these 2 islands. My Lord Count, why don't you send troops to occupy such a large piece of land? Why only 2 small islands? Amerigo asked puzzledly. Amerigo, you don't understand. Although the land is large, it is full of dense jungles. There are many fierce Indians in the jungle. If I rashly let you land, you will easily be shot to death by the Indians' bows and arrows. So, I let you find these 2 small islands first, so that you can gain a foothold first, and then use them as a springboard and base to attack the mainland. This is Marin's strategy. Marin thought about it for a long time and felt that he was currently weak and had a small population, so he could not immediately colonize on a large scale. Moreover, the most important prerequisite for colonizing America is not land, but a foothold. Just like when the British colonized North America, they rashly landed directly on the land of Virginia, and ended up fighting with the Indians many times. When they were besieged, the colonists in the British colonies ran out of food and were miserable to the point of cannibalism. Therefore, Marin would not make such a mistake. The two islands he chose, Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, were small islands of 200 to 300 square kilometers, isolated overseas. Even if there were Indians on the islands, there were only a few. On these two islands, Marin can easily occupy them and develop them with peace of mind. For example, logging, building farms and ranches. In short, developing on the two small islands would not anger the Indian tribes on the mainland. Even if they were dissatisfied, they were powerless to attack the islands. Because the Indians were still in the era of using canoes. Marin could overturn all the Indian canoes with just one boat. Moreover, these two islands were carefully selected by Marin. First of all, the area of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket Island is about 200 square kilometers, which is much larger than Texel Island. Such large islands can open up a lot of farmland. Only with farmland can there be enough food to meet the needs of the colonists. In this way, the colonization activities can proceed smoothly. Moreover, the two islands are very safe and there is no need to worry about the attack of the Indians. Not only that, Nantucket Island later became a famous whaling center in the United States. It is not far from the Newfoundland fishing ground, one of the 4 largest fishing grounds in the world, and has rich fishery resources. Therefore, many whales often appear in the sea area of this generation. Marlin only needs to send a few whaling ships to operate here, and he can catch a lot of whales. You know, the whaling industry has not yet emerged in those days, and there are plenty of whales in the sea. As long as the whales are caught, not only can a lot of whale meat be obtained, but also tons of whale oil. Whale meat can be made into salted fish, which can definitely satisfy hunger. A whale, the lightest of which weighs more than 2 tons, can yield nearly 1 ton of whale meat. 1 ton of whale meat can feed several people for a year. Not to mention the larger whales, which can easily weigh dozens of tons. As long as one whale is captured, a large amount of meat can be provided. Moreover, whale oil is also very important. In this era of lack of vegetable oil, ordinary people can also eat some whale oil. Although whale oil tastes bad. But for the poor, having oil is good enough, so how dare they be picky. Not only that, whale oil can be used to light oil lamps and provide lighting, and it can also be processed into candles. The best candles used in candlelight dinners in later generations were made from whale oil. Moreover, the cost of making soap with whale oil is also very low. In short, the whaling industry is very profitable. These two small islands can be used for farming, raising livestock, and as a base for whaling and catching common fish. In short, they are a perfect food supply base. Once Marin's men have established a firm foothold on the two islands, they can use them as their base camp to march to the land and occupy new colonies. The new colonies should be built on the seashore first, so that they will not be afraid of being besieged by the Indians. Even if the Indians surround the new colonies on land, the two small islands can provide enough supplies for the colonies through warships, so as to avoid being out of food like the stupid British and resorting to cannibalism. Before Amerigo boarded the ship, Marin took his hand and said, "Do your best, Amerigo. When you come back this time, if you successfully discover these two places, I will confer upon you the title of hereditary knight and reward you with 10,000 gold coins. You know, discovering a wild island has a different meaning from discovering India, so I'm conferring upon Columbus the title of baronet. You should understand, right?" Amerigo nodded. He certainly knew the significance of Columbus's discovery of India. After all, the discovery of India brought Marin millions of gold coins and profits, so it was normal to confer Columbus a baronet. However, this time he would explore the islands of the savage continent, which would not bring any huge profits. Therefore, it was kind of Marin to confer himself a hereditary knighthood. After all, it was hereditary. Before breaking up, Marin asked Amerigo to write a letter to his family, the purpose of which was to bring Amerigo's family to Auric. Amerigo also understood that this was Marin's request for hostages, because Marin was worried that Amerigo would reveal his information to others. However, this was also a common practice in ancient times, and it was often used by nobles, so Amerigo did not have any resistance. Just like that, under Marin's expectant gaze, Amerigo took the selected players on board two 250-class armed merchant ships and two smaller warships captured from Frisia, and embarked on a journey to explore Granada and the two islands of North America.